Hello. I did technically read in 2025. I did, technically speaking, I did read, I read books, you know them, I read some of them. Um, it's not a good idea to go and really hold standards to how much I'm reading and be like, this is the least I've ever read in a year. But also, I think it almost certainly has been, maybe not ever in my life, but in a very long time, perhaps. I don't know. I've generally gone down in how many books I've read a year for a long time. It's fluctuated, but yeah, this year the total is like what, 10 books this year. Uh, the thing with reading is that it's hard. That's not really fair. I like reading. It's just that life is hard, and I've had a lot of things occur. Model Land was pretty much the only real big book review that I released in 2025, and I read Model Land in about, I want to say, April, and I released that review at the end of the year, and I started that review in well, like May. And it took me like that entire period. I finished that review writing wise, and then it was about like 2 weeks later that the video was done. And then it took a little bit more time for editing, but yeah, I pretty much just finished writing it a little before it came out. I was working on it on and off, and then off for a very long time. I had just a very long off period of time, so that's not very good. The thing is, I always struggle with, I want to be really open about stuff a lot of the time. I have this thing where I'm always like, I don't know, I want to be a representation of something in many ways. Like, I'm quite open these days about being autistic. I'm very just like, I'm autistic because it's great that I'm autistic. It's very powerful, it's excellent, great stuff. And there's definitely a lot of people I've encountered who feel bad about being autistic. So I want to be openly autistic so that I can serve as an example of just like, yeah, I'm a grown adult, I'm autistic, it's fine, I'm having a good time, it's all possible. And so that's kind of something that I like doing, and so I like being open about a lot of stuff. At the same time, I also don't know that like I want to be open about everything in my life. I like having distance and that sort of thing. So when I have a very long off period, I don't really want to go into it. I'm not going to go into it, but at the same time, part of me is just like, I really want to go really, really into it. Sorry, this is just like rambling. I don't have a script or anything. I'm just kind of going to talk about the few books I read this year. And that's it. And also, I'm just kind of holding this microphone in one hand, and I'm recording it slightly differently than normal, so I hope the audio isn't god awful. I really have this thing where I can't hear audio quality that well, pretty much at all. So if you've ever listened to my videos and been like, what's up with this audio quality? I think my editor does something to help a bit, but just in terms of like setup, I know that I could be setting it up better, but I don't know how because I can't hear it. And I apologize for that. I'm tone deaf, but instead of tone deaf for music, which I also am tone deaf for music, I'm tone deaf for audio quality, generally speaking. So, reading. Life. I started by reading The Joyous Invasions. This is by Theodore Sturgeon. It's a pulp short story collection. I really like reading pulp sci-fi short story collections. I read 3 of them this year, and they're kind of my refresher between books. In this case, it was because I think I just finished Sky Shade in like December of the year before. And so having like a short story collection is just kind of like a breather. I love that there's just kind of a different experience every so often. I love the variety of them. I love that you really just don't know what you're gonna get. This is true of any short story collection, but especially like the ones that I read this year were from 1964, 1965, and 1966. And between them, you just get such an interesting glimpse into how, you know, different the culture was from today, but also even between these like semi-contemporary works, how different they are from each other. It's really interesting. It's also just fun because you get to read something kind of weird. And especially after all of the bad YA that I'm typically reading, I just really appreciate reading something where it has different vocabulary, different maturity, different kinds of stuff that occurs in it than reading like Alex Astor, which God knows I'm reading so much of. Yeah, so I really, really like the Joyous Invasions. Theodore Sturgeon, I don't usually like, when I'm buying these pulp stories, I am buying them mostly by the cover, but also what sounds interesting in used bookstores. And I don't actually pay that much attention to like the specifics of the authors, so I know some famous sci-fi authors of the time because I've read a lot of short story collections and stuff like this, but I hadn't, I think, heard of Theodore Sturgeon, really. And I really, really like this collection. It's 3 stories. All of them were pretty much bangers. The third one was this very interesting piece where there's this, like, character in it who has this experience that reads, in a modern sense, a lot like the character is asexual, and his arc is kind of about his realization and acceptance of this. It's not what's actually going on, but in a modern reading of it, it feels a lot like that. It's this character who's a man who feels very at odds with the image of, like, men in society. Specifically, he's very off-put by and finds himself very upset by the way that he doesn't seem to feel the same way about sex as other men, that he isn't as, like, girl crazy, that he just feels differently, and this makes him feel weird and abnormal and drives him to be actually, like, suicidal. And in the story, he then, like, has some conversations and works through that. And it was this very, like, it was very nice. It was very, like, kind of reassuring and speaking to this idea of, like, there's no such thing as, like, the typical man. You're not abnormal because so many more abnormal people exist than this perfect ideal and things like that. And it was also very interesting because the story was from 1955, and like, it's speaking to different cultural things ultimately, but it's still just that recognition from so long ago, and reading something and being like, I'm feeling touched in a way, relating this to specifically the asexual experience, but it's actually just, you know, that's not necessarily, not the intended thing about it. Anyways, it was a good story. The thing that I read after that was I read Needle in a Time Stack. This was another short story collection. Look, they're good. I was also kind of ill around this period of time, and I tend to read these things when I'm sick as well. Needle in a Time Stack was... there were a lot of stories in it that kind of had fun ideas, but the executions were pretty much always lacking. And one of the stories was, like, super, super racist. I'm not here to provide, like, full-length reviews of these things, but I have, like, some short reviews up on my blog, and Needle in a Time Stack, it kind of got me with, like, 2 of the stories were weirdly so specifically catering to me. One of them was about a weird alien crab that was living in disguise in a human body, and who had to deal with this woman who fell in love with him, and him trying to be like, you can't love me, I'm a weird alien crab, increasingly just trying to, like, scare her off, and she kept being like, I'm into it, it's good. And that story was very delightful. But yeah, one of the stories he wrote was just so ill-advised, so bad, so much so that it's like, I really can't recommend the collection or anything like that. Like, none of the stories were perfect or incredible. The ones I still kind of like still had their issues, but I just can't believe that this guy wrote one of these stories, which, instead of vaguely alluding to it, I'll just give a very brief thing. It was called Black is Beautiful. It was a story about a far future where America's been, like, hyper-segregated. There are, like, New York City is now all black, and it's just sort of about a character in this far future. It's a teenage boy and his perspective on things, but the author is, like, a white Jewish man, and he's writing in this, like, AAVE, and I definitely couldn't speak on how accurate any of it is, especially for the era. But it really, really felt like dude, you don't seem qualified to talk about this. You don't seem like you should be talking about this. You don't seem like you need to be the one providing the voice for any of this. Like, as much as the story was definitely, I think you can see elements of, like, the satire and his intention to make it about, like, segregation and racism, it was just such a story of, like, oh my god, no, buddy, you don't. But it's in here. Anyway, after that, at some point, I read one of the Adventure Zone graphic novels, which is based on the podcast The Adventure Zone by the McElroy brothers of My Brother, and Me. I own and have read all of those ones. This was like number 6, I want to say. I like them. I like them less so increasingly because I feel like the graphic novels struggle a lot more with the more, like, as the plot actually exists as more of a complex thing rather than being these self-contained arcs. It gets harder for them to contain the whole, like, extra arc and all of the plot stuff. And this one, which was The 11th Hour, worked well enough. The one that comes after it, The Suffering Game, I read that towards the end of the year. That one really struggled with balancing, like, the plot part of, like, The Suffering Game and then all of the extended outside stuff. That sounds a little bit like gibberish, but if you know what I'm talking about, then it makes sense to you. They're still quite enjoyable. I like them. I like the art. But yeah, this is also marks the part where I stopped listening to the podcast. Like, I listened to The Adventure Zone way back when it was first airing. I, like, caught up to it, and then I just sort of fell off of it. And so I never listened to The Suffering Game, so reading the graphic novel was the first time I encountered any of this plot stuff. And I have a feeling that's also why it worked a lot less for me, because I couldn't call back to my very vague memory of listening to it and knowing what was going on all the time. Anyway, next book, Bethany's Sin. I still have a love affection for Bethany's Sin. That was just a fun, good pulp horror. I really, really, really like the cover. I love that cover so much. Even the alternate covers are still really good, but, like, the edition I have is just one of the most beautiful books I've ever owned. I'm crazy for it. It was good. And then after that, I read Interesting Times. This is a Discworld book. I've been very, 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 very slowly reading Discworld. People have definitely noticed that I have, like, all of Discworld next to me. That's my flatmate's books. But, well, she's been reading all of that over the course of the year, was, like, rereading all of it. I managed to read one of them, and it was Interesting Times. This was my first time actually reading a story with Rincewind, who is this wizard failure wizard. I love him. He really is like the chew toy of the gods. He's this pathetic, sad, but not even like pathetic and sad. He's just sort of accepted his fate of being just sort of tossed around by destiny, winding up in these ridiculous situations, but kind of still making it through. He's always having an impact on things, but also really doesn't want to be. He's a wonderful character. I really liked him. Interesting Times itself was just like other Pratchett books. It's funny, it's good. There's a lot of things where I look at it and I can be like drawing on my vague historical trivia facts and being like, oh, this is based on this real thing. This stuff is sort of, this is a reference to this, and kind of calling back to a lot of stuff where I'm like, I remember hearing about, and I know a bit about, like, the supposed Mercury Lake that this Chinese emperor had and such. Interesting Times was, yeah, no, I liked it. It's not my favorite of the now 3 that I've read, but it still was, like, it was a good time, and, like, there's plenty more I really do need to read. After this point, we get to Model Land. Model Land is Model Land. I mean, I really like Model Land. I mean, I do kind of hate it, but I really like it. It feels like this sort of thing where I really am kind of defensive over Model Land in a way that I'm not about most, like, any bad books. Like, I really do feel like, I think it's because Model Land is this, like, overtly camp, ridiculous, something about it being, like, also, it's kind of odd to say, but, like, very feminine in a way. It's because I feel like it gets dismissed a lot more by people because of that kind of thing. That it's treated worse for being about, like, fashion and, like, girly stuff, even though, honestly, I wouldn't say the book is, like, crazy girly. But I think that like, element of it causes a lot of people to kind of review it and view it as more trite and bad and just sort of dismiss it like they dismiss, like one of those, like, cheap DS games that's, like, you know, girls fashion or whatever, as just sort of, like, you know, absolute trash, without assessing all of, like, the good stuff in that trash. Am I making sense? I really have experienced a lot of people talking about Model Land as it being dumb, and it is dumb, let's be real. Talking about Model Land is bad, and it is bad, let's be clear. But talking about it in a way that is so dismissive about how weird and strange and interesting it is, and part of me really does feel like there is this element of it being about modeling and that kind of thing that causes people to view it as stupid in a way that they'll call other things as stupid, but they won't look as deep into it. I don't know. I feel insane about Model Land. How about that? At this point, I read The Last Leap and Other Stories of the Supermind. So, The Last Leap, this is one of the ones I have on hand. I only have it on hand because I bought it for its cover and information and such, which, I mean, that's usually the case. But what really draws me to this book is that the back has this big text thing that's almost certainly not going to show up on camera, where it says, "Forget the kids' stuff." It's so aggressive and condescending. It's like the worst marketing pitch I could imagine, because it frames itself as this exciting, new, grown-up short story pulp sci-fi collection. And it's exactly the same as, like, others of its kind. There's nothing about it that makes it more mature, grown up, anything. But whoever did the marketing on this tried to sell it as, well, not kids stuff. It's so ill-advised, and that was kind of what drew me to it. So the description on the back is really hard to read in this light. Forget the kids stuff. All those robots and rockets and giant ants and purple monsters that eat cyanide pills for breakfast. Science fiction has grown up, and this collection is a good leap ahead of the pack, reaching beyond the realms of conscious thought into the unknown recesses of the human mind. It discovers possibilities as exciting and frightening and horrifying as the many forms these stories take. I slightly messed up reading that because this is black on dark blue and it's so hard to read. So it's not really like that at all, but I really like how dismissive it is of silly concepts when the book has silly concepts in it. My thing about this, though, that was very interesting in, like, a cultural sense is that this is specifically about, like, human consciousness, as it says there. For some reason, when I read this title, it says The Last Leap and Other Stories of the Supermind, Daniel F. Galul. That's almost certainly not how you pronounce his name. And I actually thought that it said The Last Leap and Other Stories of the Supermind, Daniel F. Galul. That's not how you pronounce his name. I thought that they were calling the author the Supermind as, like, another sort of condescending to other people and other authors, and saying, this author is the Supermind, this genius. But no, they mean the Supermind as in, like, that's sort of part of the theming of it. And these are all stories about psychic phenomena, basically. And what's really fun about that is that there really was this period of time in the 50s, 60s, where the idea that humans are psychic, could evolve psychicness, that this was something that, like, telepathy was just inevitable. It was real, and if it wasn't real, we were going to evolve it or discover it, and that would be the next step. And there's just all of these things about people with psychic power that are treated as part of science fiction. In this day and age, we really would call it more like a fantasy thing, I suppose. But it's kind of got baked into sci-fi because at the time, it was kind of science. Like, it was science in that people really believed in ESP and were investigating if it was real. And wasn't real, but it was taken a lot more seriously. And that's kind of the reflection that's present in this book, where all of the stories are fantastical. But again, the idea that pretty soon ESP is probably going to be proven, or humanity is obviously going to evolve so that we're all like a connected psychic hive mind that can hear all of our thoughts. Like, that's just kind of inevitable. That's part of it. And I really like looking back on that era because you just don't see that anymore. But because it was treated as potentially real science, it winds up in these science fiction books all the time. So at this point, I got to reading Oro and Grim, the Lightlark 3.5. Goddamn, these books are... okay. They're so bad. These are bad in such an exciting new way. And I feel so repetitive sometimes talking about Lightlark because obviously this will be my 4th Lightlark review. And not many people talk about Lightlark anymore, but I never got in on talking about Lightlark because I was like chasing a trend. I'm here for the long haul and I'm interested in it, you know? And Oro and Grim is so weird. That's what makes it so bad, is the weirdness about it. Like, the way that the author, who's, by the way, just like releasing way too many books in such a short period of time, like she's not editing these, she's not rereading them, it's just so obvious. But the way that this author is treating her characters and her world is so just bizarre and ill-advised. And Grim and Oro, these 2 novellas, are god-awful. They're first person present tense, where all of Lightlark has been third person past tense, and that's like really dissonant when you're reading it. And the other thing about it is that everyone's saying fuck all the time, and that's never shown up in Lightlark before. It's just like suddenly everybody's just constantly going like fuck in their head, like they're always just saying fuck, and that's never shown up in the books up till this point. And it just feels like I'm going insane, because the first time you read that, you're like, something about this feels wrong, but I can't remember. And then you go back and you check and you're like, that's words never come up in Lightlark. You know, shit has never been used in Lightlark. Suddenly, fuck is in this book like 43 times. And it changes something about like the tone and like the way it's written. And especially it just feels so weird because it's like, why did nobody think to notice this? Why did absolutely nobody think we should check if this is different from the books before it in a way that makes it feel very weird? And then, because I was curious, I recently checked the book 4, Crown Tide, has even more swearing in it. Like, suddenly now all the characters are just saying fuck. And it's not like I'm offended or anything. I don't I don't think people can't say fuck in books. It's that it's never occurred in the book up till this point. And so suddenly, it's everywhere in the book. It's just so, like, dissonant from everything about it. It makes the books just have a different voice and tone, just a little bit. That it feels like you're reading something different. That the author has changed. Where, really, what's almost certainly happened is that she's been reading books with fuck in it, and then her writing, she just starts using the word fuck, because she's been reading books that use the word. And that's it. And nobody thought to be like, we should make sure that this is cohesive with the books that came before it. Instead, it's like the word just has kind of entered everyone's collective lexicon. Oro and Grim, these are such bad novellas. They also make the boys the same character. Like, they were already kind of similar, but in my head I always thought to myself that there was very distinct differences between Oro and Grim. And you would imagine that these 2 books, these novellas from their POVs, would serve to separate the characters even more. But instead, the novellas make it clear that these 2 had, like, the same childhood, the same experiences, they have, like, a lot of the same emotions, the same difficulties. The way that they feel about Isla is exactly the same, in that they're, like, take brain damage from how perfect she is at all times. It's given me this point where, and I don't think this is true, but it would be very funny if it was, where, like, by the end of the book, I started to be like, maybe Oro and Grim were once the same being who were, like, split into 2 and reincarnated. but actually they're one deity. And I don't think that's true, but the way that they're exactly the same in this book is insane. Anyway, like, my review's coming for that. I've been working on it. I'm working hard, I swear to God. But yeah, that'll be coming. I have no idea how long it will be. It's something where, like, the plot is so bare bones, but there's so much to unpack about the characterization and the world building and just little things. Like, I'm a couple chapters into my coverage. I'm at like 6,000 words or something. I have no idea, but goddamn, it's gonna be a journey. At this point, okay, we're at like the end of the year now. I read the newest Adventure Zone, The Suffering Game. I already talked about that. And then I read a book called A Guest in the House. Yes, A Guest in the House by Emily Carroll. This was a really good graphic novel. I got this for free recently at like just the table. It was just at a free book table. It looked cool. The cover looks cool, and it was a great book, and I would highly recommend it. I've read something by her before that I can't really remember very well. This one I'm immediately struck by. I think it worked extremely well. It's a ghost story, but it's also about a story about just a woman who has married a man and is left alone a lot of the time and trying to fit in with this new like life and her new stepdaughter and feeling kind of out of place. A guest in the house. She's the guest in the house. The ghost that is there is the guest in the house. Is there even a ghost? Who knows? It's just a very good, well-plotted, well-drawn, beautiful illustrations graphic novel. It was very nice. Yeah, so that's it. I hope this hasn't been completely impossible to listen to, in terms of both audio and me kind of rambling. Yeah, I don't have really anything more to say. Like, part of me is still kind of compelled to be like, well, let me talk more. Look, it's been rough. I really hope that I'll have a better year this year. I think that every year, and then there often are problems, but I really do. Last year, there were issues and things, and part of it is that I've been going to therapy like all of my life, pretty much. Not all, but like for many, many, many years since I was a kid, I've gone to therapy on and off. And I've been in therapy at this point for a number of years with like the same therapist, which is very nice. This year, which is something I've always known, but has really been like hitting home, and something that has been one of the reasons for a lot of like taking time off and not being able to really work, is that I've been dealing with like CPTSD, which I've always kind of known that I have, but it's this weird thing of like it really kind of clicking in many ways. And yeah, that's like a lot of stuff to kind of like process and deal with. It's literally complex. It's right there in the name. And that's, related to all of this stuff. And, it's been something that just means that, it's harder. And instead of doing things like work, I've been also trying to do things like get out of the house more. I'm a bit shut in. So I've been playing a lot of Magic the Gathering. And I like Magic the Gathering. But yeah. I'm taking these really long pauses as I try to be like, and I should go and say something really eloquent and tie up these thoughts together. I don't really have anything, man. I don't know, but life is life. I really try to hold on to that. At this point, like, I've really hit a time and age where I stop holding myself to milestones and expectations. Like, I'm somebody who's chronically ill, I'm mentally ill, I have a lot of other things, and I get by and I just try to have a good time where I can and accept when I can't have a good time, and that's just sort of it. I feel like if I hold myself to these harsh milestones, if I hold myself to like, I need to do these things, part of me always still will. I get anxious if I haven't worked on a review for ages, if I'm not publishing stuff and, things like that, but I really try to just let go of that as much as possible, because I have to accept that like I'm just not as capable as a typical person in so many ways, and like, what can you do about that? I say like, that's life, but I really say that in like oh, that's life, sad way. I just have to be like, yeah, okay, that's life. Like, what are you gonna do about it? I'm the one who's gonna do stuff about it. Everyone else just has to accept that, and that everyone else also circles back to me and expectations. But yeah, I really hope that I'll get more done. my plan right now is that I'm finishing this Oro and Grim review. I'm going to read Lightlark 4. I hope that I have time to read a book in between my review for Lightlark 4. Something fun, because Alex Astor has another goddamn book coming out in like April, maybe March. And I want to read that one too. It's her adult romantasy thing. I'm quite curious about it. It sounds so generic. It sounds a lot like Lightlark, but like Lightlark Revised. Like, it's just kind of like her second go at kind of a similar concept. I'm quite curious about that one. And that'll be so much Alex Astor in a row, but I want to. And then after that point, hopefully we just have a long, calm period before, Lightlark 5 at the end of 2026, I hope. And we'll see what I do with that. But again, I really don't want to hold myself to anything. And okay, I'm done rambling. I've spoken way too much. My throat hurts. It's hurt this whole time. Hell yeah.